Did Boy Kill? The Visits of Mr. Bob. This is part 4 of the Did Boy Kill series. Much has happened over the past weeks since I last posted, so let me get you all up to speed. Timmy Jr., or should I say Bridget S., doesn't recognize that she is trapped in a 4-year-old boy's body. She does what kids are supposed to do at this age: plays with toys, loves running around outside, watches Disney shows, eats a routine schedule, etc. It's odd she has been speaking like a 19-year-old, having a conversation with a stranger at a coffee shop. It has been so hard to explain Timmy's behavior to people. We mostly lie, but it was difficult to explain it to a shrink. We decided not to visit the shrink recommended by the hospital. They are already looking at us cockeyed when Timmy Jr. was first brought into the emergency room last week. We eventually met Dr. Himani, an Indian-born psychiatrist and neurologist that was recommended to us from a close friend. A few days after Bridget possessed Timmy Jr., our friend said that this doctor would be sympathetic to our situation. I was not quite sure what that meant at the time. It could have meant that the doctor may have not thrown me and my husband into the psych ward with our son, at least not right away. Truth be told, that was one of the reasons why we waited so long to seek help. It's a difficult proposition to explain to people what we have seen and been through. It's hard not to be skeptical. Hell, a part of me is still skeptical that this is just a nightmare and that I'd wake any minute, but I know it isn't. For the first couple sessions with Dr. Himani, we tried to limit the details of what happens the night Melvin Nimmer Jr. killed Tommy Jr. We explained that Timmy woke from a dream screaming and that he stopped breathing until Timmy Sr. resuscitated him. After handing him the police and doctor's reports from that night, of course, omitting the truth of that night, we explained how he was now Bridget. It didn't take long for Dr. Himani to know that we were hiding quite a bit. We soon found out why our friend felt the doctors would be sympathetic to us. Dr. Himani came from a very deep Hindu roots. After a couple sessions, it did not take long for him to become fascinated with the prospect of Timmy Jr. being an instrument of reincarnation or possession. And after we told him the whole story, he quickly became obsessed with our case. Hourly sessions became hours and daily. General conversations with Timmy Jr., Bridget really. Dr. Himani learned what we had already known, that she was a young Southern girl from Louisiana and that she thought it was the 1970s. At that point, we explained everything we found out. Articles found out about her murder, where she was dumped to die, and how it correlated with her nightmares and about the murderer. She did not let on to the doctor that she knew she was murdered, just that she didn't know where she was, but just that she liked us. The doctor felt it was odd that she remembered so much of her past life, but nothing about her murder. He was still skeptical about whether Timmy Jr. was indeed Bridget. That was until we put him under hypnosis. There are some portals that are meant to stay closed. Sometimes one must venture through, out of necessity. Our necessity was to find out where our son was, or whether he ever actually existed at all. We needed to know the truth. One way or the other, I think Dr. Himani understood, which is why he held Timmy Jr. under hypnosis more than any other patient in his 35 years of medical practice. Unfortunately, in the pursuit of truth, you do not always find the answers you're hoping to find, and sometimes the truth is far worse. The sessions started out simple enough. Dr. Himani had Tim and I sit in another room and watch over his video monitors and listen via speakers. After putting Timmy under, the doctor spoke directly to Bridget. This was unexpected for the doctor, since he expected the real Timmy to come out right away in his subconscious mind. As the session progressed, Dr. Himani started to ask direct questions about the last things she remembered before showing up in my son's body, to which she still has no comprehension. Looking back, I deeply regret that, he asked. She detailed how she was leaving a local drugstore when a man in a work van approached her for help finding his little girl. She remembered being dragged into the back of his van and hit repeatedly in the face until she blacked out. She remembered being chained to a bed in some drab mobile home. She remembered being violated in ways and tools that could have been imagined by the devil himself. She remembered the scratching and the knocking coming from underneath the thin floors of the trailer. She remembered the searing pain of her legs and arms being broken as he was stuffing her limp and defeated body into that septic tank. And she remembered the smell, the vomiting, the rising of sewage with presumably every flush, and her eventually drowning in a sea of piss and shit. All of it. All the details and emotional throes of an indescribable torture was spoken from the mouth of my 4-year-old boy. He lied there, whimpering. We all sat there quiet, stunned. All of the details, most of them were confirmed in the articles the Redditors found last week that I mentioned in my third entry, were overwhelming. I never had been so defeated. It was as though this murderer reached out of my boy's mouth and slaughtered a part of me and my husband. But even our devastation from witnessing this interview failed in comparison to what this girl went through and what my son's fragile mind was experiencing again. And yet, for the first time, feeling defeated, however, could not quite quell the fear in us when we heard my son scream out, petrified and lonely in his own voice, "Mommy!" At that point, his body started to convulse and his eyelids rolled in the back of his head. I couldn't count how many voices started to spew out of my son's mouth. It was as though dozens of tortured souls were clawing their way out of my son's throat, each fighting to be heard, and each fighting to escape. Escape from my son, escape from someone, escape from something. He collapsed back onto the couch, exhausted. I ran to the door, trying to go into the room to do something, anything, even if it was just to hold him and comfort him. But I could not open the locked door. Tim yelled out, "Sarah, he's sitting up." I ran back to the monitor to check on how my son was doing. Dr. Hamani was trying to communicate with him, but Timmy was unresponsive. You could tell he wasn't sure if Timmy was still under hypnosis or not. So, to make sure, the doctor started to count down from 10 to 1 and lightly snapped his fingers to end the hypnosis. When it did, Timmy's eyes looked up from the doctor's direction, quickly lifted his fingers, and started to yell. Quickly, he lifted his finger and started to yell. It wasn't Timmy, though, it was Bridget, and she yelled, "No, Mr. Bob, please no, not again, Mr. Bob. Why are you here? Please leave me alone." Timmy passed out, face forward, and slammed his head sharply on the coffee table in front of him. My husband kicked down the door and we ran into the room. I went to check on my son and found him bleeding profusely from his forehead and nose from the fall. Tim was looking everywhere around the room to see who Bridget was talking to. Not that he could have done anything even if he found him. He knew, just like I knew, that Bridget's murderer was named Robert Bob Honenberg, and that he committed suicide a few weeks after Bridget's body was found in that septic tank in 1978. Dr. Hamani has decided to stay with us at our home until we figure something out. I know he cares for Timmy, but I think he needs to see what we saw when Melvin Nimmer Jr. visited us. Something like this shakes you to the core, and like I said before, it makes you question everything you think you know. Though Dr. Hamani disagrees with the decision, we are expecting a visit from the priest tomorrow. It has been a couple days since the doctor has moved in, and he has witnessed the night terrors we described. Timmy, Bridget, has also seen Bob on 5 different occasions. Each visit is short, but they are getting more intense for Bridget. But we have not seen him like we saw Nimmer Jr. I'm convinced this is his way of torturing Bridget. We also have watched the hypnosis session tapes over and over. We are still unsure of how many voices we heard, even after listening to the tapes repeatedly, a horrible, horrible task. We are up to 23. In the video footage, we also saw what Bridget was pointing at. It was hard to make out what Bob had in his hand, but like I said, I'm convinced he's torturing Bridget all over again. The only thing keeping me hopeful at the moment is that I heard my Timmy calling out for me. That was my son I heard before all those other voices came tumbling through. I'm turning over every rock I can, looking for help. If anyone reading this has any ideas or finds anything in research that may help answer our questions or help put a stop to this, please post below and let us know. We are desperate.